Hi YouTube, and welcome back to my channel. So thank you for joining me for another episode of my birthday retrospective. Sorry yesterday's video was almost as long as my decade-long ones. But there was a lot to unpack for 2016 and for when I was 44. So now I'm turning 45 at the end of 2016 and then into 2017. That year 2017 was very much a transitional year for me. Obviously, I had just gone through a major trauma the year before. 2017, I was starting to come out of some of my grief and starting to focus more on myself and, okay, now what do I do? I mean, I'd gotten a big chunk of everything with my husband's estate settled at that point. It's still bits and pieces dealing with that throughout 2017, but it wasn't as much. And so I was able to put more energy towards myself and my needs, and like, okay, so I'm not married anymore. Now what do I do? I had taken a huge step back from my business in 2016, and I still leaned pretty hard on the subcontractors I'd hired, and they were still doing the bulk of the work. I was starting to pick up a little bit of work in things, but I wasn't as aggressively pursuing new clients either. I kind of relied on a lot of the same clients that I had for several years. And so I really wasn't picking up on business as much, and instead I was focusing more on writing and trying to maybe, finish a novel and get something published. I ultimately didn't publish anything in 2017, but I was pouring a lot more energy into writing and a lot less energy into my business at that point. And like I said, doing a lot of introspection and just kind of looking at, okay, so I spent this last decade pouring a lot of energy into my husband and his mental health, and realizing that I had kind of neglected my own for a long time. I did start. I ultimately didn't seek therapy until the next year, but I started exploring myself and my identity. One of the first things that I kind of came to a realization of, and kind of came out as, is being on the asexual spectrum and being demisexual. I actually have an old video that I made of it. And then later that year, I started thinking more about my gender and my gender identity, and how, and recalling how when I was a child that I had insisted that I was a boy, and how my grandparents had supported that to some degree, and I started putting pieces together and realizing that, I might just be genderqueer, and that's kind of where I kind of got into realizing I was trans. But I kind of started with, well, at the very least I'm genderqueer. At the very least my gender is not, I'm not cisgender. I definitely was not an AFAB or assigned female at birth person who identified as a woman. I never did. I never, the connection between me and the word woman just never clicked. Or girl. I hated girl. I did not I was like, I'm not a child. That was a trigger for me. It's like, do not refer to me as girl. But woman didn't feel right either. Tomboy was kind of the identity I went with for most of my adult life. I did refer to myself as a woman because that was kind of a default, but it felt like I was talking about somebody else and not about myself, if that makes any sense. And so I kind of embraced genderqueer initially. I also dyed my hair purple that year because I was just like, I need to do something else with myself. And so I was exploring a lot of things, and reading a lot. And I did actually go. One of my favorite resources on the internet is Google Scholar, because they have a lot of science based papers, especially peer-reviewed papers and from journals and things. And so I tend to go to Google Scholar if I want, the more scientific perspective on things. So I was reading a lot of scientific papers and things, but I was also watching a lot of YouTube videos and watching a lot of trans YouTubers, specifically the female to male, the transgender men YouTubers. Jamie Rains is one. Jackson Bird. Okay, I'm terrible with names. I have mentioned this before. I'm turning 50, so my memory's going, and I've never been good at names, but there's a lot of really good transgender male YouTubers out there that I really love. Some are in the UK, some are in the US, some are in Canada, but there's a bunch of them, and I really enjoy their content. And a couple of them have PhDs, which that actually lends credibility to a lot of what they were saying. So they're not just talking about their feelings. They actually have an education to back what they're talking about. But even the ones who don't have the PhDs, they're talking about their own personal experience and everything. And I related to some of them. When I first encountered trans YouTubers, a lot of them were straight. In other words, they were transgender men. They transitioned in, but they had a female partner. And so they're straight presenting relationships, and basically they're straight because transgender men are men, and if a man is dating a woman, they are considered straight. They might be queer in other ways, I don't know, but and so I didn't quite connect with them. It wasn't until I started seeing some that were identifying as bisexual and gay, and I was like, oh, okay. And I forget which YouTuber it was. It was one of them that kind of went through a list of things, of check marks of things to understand about being trans, and they were like, here's one thing to understand, is that sexuality and gender identity are not the same thing. And so, you can be trans and be attracted to a particular gender or sex, and even after you transition, it doesn't change who you're attracted to, because you don't, orientation is very much, sexual orientation is very much determined by people's outward presentation. And so if two people are presenting male, they are labeled gay. If two people are presenting female, they are labeled lesbian. If one is presenting female and one is presenting male, they're labeled straight. However, there could be a pansexual in the mix. There could be a bisexual in the mix. And just because you transition your gender doesn't necessarily mean, you don't change your sexuality, but your sexuality label will change. And so, I was straight. I was perceived as straight before I transitioned, and I'm now perceived as gay because I'm attracted to men. And I'm getting ahead of myself because a lot of the stuff is for tomorrow's video. But yeah, so I was just kind of absorbing like a sponge all of this stuff. And starting to talk about it on this channel as well. You can go back. I think I do have a playlist of my transition videos and things, and so, and when I first started coming out and coming to this realization, I was still trying to figure out which label felt right for me. I went with genderqueer. I went with bigender for a while. I kind of played with those two. I toyed with the concept of non-binary, but then I realized nope, that didn't feel right at all for myself. Bigender, non-binary people are absolutely valid. It just didn't fit for me. And then I eventually was like, I think I'm trans. I do. But I wasn't sure if I wanted to transition or not. There were two defining moments that kind of made me realize that I wanted to transition. One is I decided to buy a binder. I was like, okay, let me flatten my chest and see how that feels. Bought the binder, put it on, put my clothes on, looked in the mirror, and I was like, oh my, yes, this is it. that was like the first aha moment for me. I never liked my chest. Never. Couldn't stand the damn things. It didn't help the fact that I had a lot of health issues. I never had cancer or anything, but I had fibroids and cysts, and they hurt all the time. And they weren't enormous by any means, but they were a constant source of just ick, no, can we get rid of these? So flattening and wearing the binder was just so affirming of the sense of euphoria I got looking in the mirror and seeing a flat chest, or a flatter chest anyway. It kind of gave me pecs by squishing them down, but I don't know. I just I loved how I looked in that. So that was one, and then there was one YouTuber that kind of went over and went into an area talking about genitalia and stuff that a lot of YouTubers tend not to talk about. It's a very private topic, and most people don't want to talk about their genitalia, which is valid. But he actually did, which I greatly appreciate. Because one of the things that I was kind of wondering about and worrying about and things in terms of how that worked with testosterone, and he kind of went into detail about it, and I was like, okay, I want that. I want. And so I was like, okay, because one of the reasons I was really hesitant about going on testosterone is I was kind of afraid to lose my hair, which so far 3.5 years and it's still there. My hairline has kind of gone up a little bit, but for a almost 50-year-old male, this is actually a pretty normal hairline, and it's not like back here or anything where I need a comb over, at least not yet. That could still happen. But and I was convinced, because I know both of my grandfathers were bald, and I know my mom's dad. I have photos of him in when he was younger than me, and he'd already started balding, and so I was convinced that as soon as I got testosterone, my hair would just go poof and just gone. That was my big worry. Thankfully, I talked to my endocrinologist, and it's one, don't worry about it, because it might not happen that fast, and if we see signs of that, there are treatments we can do. And then there's a finasteride, I forget how it's pronounced, but there's a medication that can be given that can help slow down or stop hair loss, and then there's you can do Rogaine, and there's a number of things that I could be doing. It doesn't seem to be necessary yet, and so we're just kind of wait and see at this point. I'm hoping I hang on to my hair, so we'll see. But once I kind of got past my fear of that, that's when I started okay, I started making a plan in terms of what I needed, because I knew for insurance purposes I would need to go to therapy, and then all my doctors needed to know, and I kind of went the medical route first. I wanted to seek a therapist. I wanted to tell my doctors and just kind of get the whole medical thing rolling. And once I was into that process, that's when I came out. But that's tomorrow's video, so let's not go into that too deeply. But yeah, so a lot of 2017 was me just spending a lot of time reading and researching and watching videos and playing with my hair, playing with my clothes, putting on the binder, and just kind of rediscovering myself. That was my year of self rediscovery. Obviously, I was writing a lot as well, again, and it was 2015. Yeah, 2015 was the first year I did NaNoWriMo. Then I did it in 2016, despite everything. I think that year I just did a fanfiction story because I couldn't get into wrapping my brain around doing something original, so I just did a fanfiction story that year. And then 2017 I did NaNoWriMo again, and I actually wrote a sequel to the novel I wrote in 2016. Those are my sci-fi novels, and it's a series that I'm kind of still working on. I haven't published yet. I'm still working on those. Needing to do a rewrite on those, so there's that. But they're written. They're just they need improvement. And that's basically where my focus was in 2017. Really was not picking up a lot of work with my business, and honestly was starting to think about stepping away from the business. I continued it for one more year past 2017, but my heart kind of wasn't into it anymore. But yes, so that was my being, when I being 45. I mean, I didn't really celebrate my birthday that year. I mean, I think I went out with some friends or something, but I didn't do anything big. I didn't go to Vegas or something like I did for 42. And yeah, that was that year. So thank you so much for joining me. I hope you're enjoying my retrospective, and please, thumbs up, comment, like, subscribe, all those wonderful things. And until tomorrow's video, take care. Bye-bye.